Hanchi Scott Barron, one of my best friends, Kiyoshi Adet Rice, Big Al Panecchia, another super fan. And Sean, let's get this going, man.
Thanks, Sensei. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I am one of your hosts, and Happy New Year to everybody. It's our first show of 2026, and I'm so excited to be here with you. And I'm so excited to be with our guest, Sensei Don Warrener. And we're going to crack in. Sensei Warrener, what we love to do is jump into a question out of the gate that has broad appeal, and then we'll do our introductions, and then we'll start getting in more specifically to your story. So, what I wanted to ask you, Sensei, is in some of the research I was doing on you, there was an interesting sentence that just said you believe it's really important to preserve the history of martial arts. And I want to talk to you about why in 2026, when kids can YouTube a move and figure it out pretty quick, why does the history matter? And then that's something we're going to go around the horn on.
Okay, well, first off, we've got something that I would like to say. Please, everybody, do not call me Sensei. My name is Don Warrener. Please call me Don. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, and after, if you want to ask me why I don't want you to call me Sensei, I will be happy to explain it. History. History is important. I mean, it's our legacy. It's in Canada. I mean, it's our history. It's the history of martial arts all over the world. And it's just another aspect of martial arts training that will enhance the students' knowledge level of the total martial arts.
I appreciate that. And we are going to go around the horn on this because we're all lovers of history. Uh, why not tell us why you go with Don, and we'll respect that. And for everybody watching, you know that we're rank respecters here and we appreciate the titles, but we also respect our guests. So Don it is. So Don,
Thank
why
you.
do you not like to be called Sensei?
Uh, Well, first off, you're not my student, right? And I reserve that term since I had total respect for the term sensei or anything else, any of the other titles, but you guys are not my students. And I reserve that for my students. And I don't want everybody else calling me sensei just because it's the thing that's happened over the last X number of years. And I'm not your sensei, so don't call me sensei. I've got about 10 people I allow to call me sensei. And other than that, I ask everybody, just call me Don. I mean, I don't need any superlatives or names or titles or anything like that, and so that's why I say, please just call me Don.
Sounds good, Don, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I've known of you since I began martial arts. So let's go around the horn a little bit. We're going to get to Don's story more specifically after the intros, but let's start with you, Sensei Dolphin. You love history. You've studied history, both Asian and also not at university, but you're the person I used to watch when I was a student looking ahead at other students, and you always had deep and interesting history questions. Why does it matter, and why does it matter to you?
I think if you think about where you're going, you have to know where you came from. And, I guess history is his story. So, especially for our styles, Okinawan history is more an oral tradition. But I think knowing something of Sakugawa or Matsumura or Funakoshi or Itosu, it's not going to hurt you with what you're doing right now. It can only help you to know a little more about where it came from. Um, I like to think of this as more like a family thing, right? Like Demura Sensei said, all karate people are my family. When he was on, he said, all karate people are my family. Well, how can you be family with somebody that you don't know anything about them? You don't know their history. You don't know their exploits or the things they were good at or the things they were passionate about. So for me, I don't actually know my own family history that well, but I know my martial arts history family really well. So I think maybe for me personally, it's filling a void inside of myself. Um, but we're all family, as Demora Sensei said. So that's where I take it, Sean.
I appreciate that. I want to chip in really briefly because my answer was going to be along your lines, was the his story, and I was just thinking about those legends we hear, and we know that Richard Kim wrote a lot of them in his two books that we read a lot of, and it really stimulated my imagination when I started, and it made me think beyond facts because we don't know how much was literally true or not. And it got me excited. You know, I can know what's literally true about Hanshi Legacy or you, but with those older masters, I like the idea that there's still a little bit of a Santa Claus vibe where it's like, let's assume there was a little magic in the air and let's strive for that, even if it's unattainable as humans. Sensei Suino, where do you go with the idea of the importance of history and the way I phrased it to Sensei Ofan? Why is it important in general, but why is it important to you?
Well, let me just stick with why it's important to me. And I kind of I vibe with what you just said. I love the myths and legends. I love the archetypes of martial arts. It inspires me to try to be better, even if they're not 100% true. You know, when I read about the stories of the Japanese samurai or the Benkei versus Yoshitsune or the shogunates having these big battles. It's just inspirational to think that somebody could do something that's almost superhuman. And it means that there's always more up there, more to work on, right? Try to get better and better and better. So I'm just going to go with that part. I just find the myths and legends, the stories, the real histories and the apocryphal histories really inspirational. And I always keep coming back to them for that reason.
We can all use a little inspiration. Hanshi Legacy, what about you? Why is broad history important for everyone and why does it matter to you?
Well, what we're doing now, I think, is we're making a living history so that I don't have to hear Matsumura's words from someone else, Master Kim, for instance. Not that they weren't good history, but it's good to hear it from the person themselves, see how they feel about it. Another good reason for it is when people want to look up for schools. If they want to look up a sport karate club or a classical karate club or a true Goju Ryu or Shorin Ryu club, then they'll know where to look, right? They'll have that history. And finally, when people come in and they say they're a second dan and they want to train in your dojo, and they say that um, say Donnie Warrener was their sensei, and he says they're not, then we can check that out without having to bother Don. So there are a lot of different reasons, but that's about enough, I suppose.
Thanks, Hanshi. Really appreciate that. Don, is there anything you want to add since you started with your answer and we've chatted briefly since?
The only thing that I can say about history is that I'm not really that interested in it. I don't. I try my best to not live in the past, and I try to live in the present, and not the future, but the present. So what I'm really interested in is what's Gary Legacy doing now? Like where do you guys come into this? How come you guys are doing this? Like um I'm more interested in the now and living in the now rather than living in the past and or living in the future. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't interest me. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's not what I'm interested in.
And let me ask you, Don, because I know that you have looked at history in the past and was there a turning point for you? Was there either a point in your martial arts or an age you hit where that shifted for you, or has this always been a feeling you've had?
Um, I think it's probably my study of a little bit of study on Buddhism or on Zen or talking to various masters. Like one of the things that I used to do that was pretty cool was whenever I would meet one of these great masters, I would always tell them that I'm writing for Black Belt Magazine and that I would like to do an interview with them, that I might be able to get into Black Belt Magazine. Well, when you say that, the world opens up to these people and they all want to talk to you. And one of the questions that I always asked everybody was, what is enlightenment? What is Satori? And I mean, every one of them went, whoa. I mean, from Gozo Shiodo from the Aikido fame, direct student of Yoshiba, or Kenazawa, or Nishiyama, or Sensei Kim, or more recently, I have a friend who's a Shugendo monk, and I asked him the same question. And almost all of them always come back to the same state, that their enlightenment comes to living in the now, not living in the past, because you can't do anything about the past. It's gone. And you can't do anything about the future because that's only a prediction. But living right now is what's important to me. I'm not saying it's what's important to everybody or what you should believe in. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for me, I live in the now. Like today, I went to Japantown and I had a terrific lunch. Last night, I was up in at EM3 Studios. It was a wonderful time, but that's past. Now, what's important to me is that this interview is heard by as many people as possible.
Appreciate that, Don. Hanshi Legacy, you've often described Zen very simply with your pen analogy. Do you want to throw that out? Am I putting you on the spot?
No, I'll
On
just go
stage.
along with what Don's saying.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really love that, Don. Thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. We always like to start with a fun question, and we're going to get into the specifics of our guest life. But first, what I want to say is if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on a podcast, we're so happy you're here. Hit that subscribe, hit that like. But if you're here on the Zoom channel tonight, and Hanshi Legacy mentioned this is a living history we're working to create, and we're so happy you're here with us. We're so happy Don's here with us, and I just want to say that our questions, we'd like them from you as long as they're for our guest or in and around the topic we're discussing. And that chat button's going to light up on the bottom. So throw those questions in and we'll ask them of our guest or each other. And I want to make my introduction for my co-host tonight quite simple. Sensei Randy Dauphin, Sensei Nicolas Suino, and Hanshi Gary Legacy. I looked it up. We're our first episode of 2026, and it's our 233rd episode. Now, 233, that it's not a 500 or a 250, but it's a great number because we're coming into a new year, and I can't believe that for, well, 1.5 times 233 episodes, we've spent this time together and we've chatted with so many people. Some of them have returned, some of them have passed on, and we're so grateful to be a part of this living history. And I'm so honored to be able to do this with my senseis. And so I just want to say thank you for all watching and thank you to my senseis. And, you know, he doesn't love when I pointed out this specifically, but for Sensei Randy Dauphin for specifically calling us one day and going, I got an idea. And now we get to be on episode 233 of that idea. I'll throw it to you, Sensei Dauphin, to introduce Don Warrener.
Thanks, Spence. It's truly a partnership. I think maybe I was the one who gave us all the push to get it started, but we've talked about it for a while. So, but thanks for the accolades. I'm really excited to introduce Don Warrener tonight. If you don't know who Don Warrener is and you're in martial arts, I don't know where you've been or what you've been doing. Um, some of his teachers and training partners in Canada are people like Benny Allen, Bob Dalgleish, Wally Slokey, Ted Martin, Bill Hind, uh, Frank DeLorenzi, Greg Mellor, Jimmy Fields, Tony Facchetti, Frank Lee, Frank Wishart, Mr. Don Lopez. Listen, I really have to do some abbreviations on this because we'll be here all night if I read everything about Don Warrener. Internationally, he's trained with people like Gogen Yamaguchi, his son Goshi Yamaguchi, Demura Sensei, uh, Kubata Sensei, Bill Wallace, Joe Lewis. You guys both trained with the same person, Sean Nishiyama Sensei. You've both trained with Nishiyama Sensei. Um, Don and Sensei Legacy have trained with Master Richard Kim. I'm really proud that I had a chance to meet him as well. Kanizawa Sensei. Some of his senior students are people we've had on the show and people that I really respect. People like Sensei Phil McCall, Sensei Conrad Copeland, Sensei Leighton Morrison, Sensei Frank Clayton, Sensei Debbie Rizzo, and Tasha Lord. Like these are people we all know and we've all known for a long time. And as a matter of fact, he's had over 9,000 students since he started doing his martial arts. He has lots of great friends and people, again, people we've had on the show, people like Stephen Hayes, Benny Iriquez, Bob Wall, little known name, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Hint, hint, we'd really like to get him on here, Don. Um, uh, Hanshi Caesar Burkowski, our good friend Hanshi Jean Fernet, uh, Demora Sensei's student, and our good friend Ton. They're also good friends. Peter Gilpin. And now some of the major events that Don's done. He's actually started, he got his black belt in 1968 on March 15th, 1968. And he received his eighth dan from both Chuck Merriman and Soroka Sensei. So Merriman Sensei and Soroka graded him to 10th dan. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records for breaking 3,444 bricks in 4 hours and 40 minutes. Um, Back in the day, he did do some competing in 1968, first in Canadian Karate Championships. And a notable moment there was that Sensei Peter Urban told him he was a tough fighter. And Don says that that's one of the things that made him a lifer, is having a master like that say that to him. Um, He's won kata and kumite at the Eastern Canadian Karate Championships. In 1997, he won first in weapons and second in team kata at the European Karate Championships in Frankfurt, Germany. Um, One really cool thing, one of the first times I ever cross paths was in 1996, and that's when he hosted the WKO World Championships at McMaster University. And actually, Sensei Scott Byron, who's on this call, competed on that team for Canada and was there. I know Sensei Copeland was on that team, and Sensei Legacy and I went there and watched. I was a newly minted black belt when that happened. He's a graduate from the National Coaching and Development course at McMaster University. At one point, he had 103 franchises, and he's open to 32 of his own schools. Um, in 2006, Don was the one who helped to start the Canadian Black Belt Hall of Fame, of which Hanchi Legacy is a member. Uh, he established the first college of martial arts. In the business world, he has Rising Sun Productions, uh, Masters Publishing, DW Masters Publishing, Warner Entertainment Distributing. He's wrote over 22 books and produced over 1,000 DVDs, and a lot of those books are actually over my shoulder right now. I have so many of those books, and I'm so happy that he's done that. Um, for me, going back to the history thing, I like reading all those books about history, and I really thank him for doing those because they've helped a lot of people. He's traveled to 64 countries, including Okinawa and Japan 6 times. He was the president of the World Karate Organization. He trains Goju in both Okinawa and Japan, but also has some knowledge in Shotokan, Chito-ryu, Eskrima, some knife ninja techniques, wrestling, boxing, Hangar, Tai Chi, Jiu-Jitsu, and some Kabuto. Um, but he says the biggest accomplishment is in his life is his fabulous and amazing, talented, beautiful daughters, who he names Pride and Joy. So that's my official introduction. I always like to give a couple of my own thoughts about Don Warrener. This is a person who, from the very first day I went in the dojo, I've heard his name. It was in his dojo that Sensei Legacy first met Benny Allen, so we can thank him for that. Um, the second WKO World Championships in Hamilton, my daughter competed for Team Canada on that. And I'm not sure if Don will remember this, but I was out on the floor with her and I said, that person on the stage is somebody, she also likes to meet different masters and different karate. I said, that person on the stage is somebody you might want to meet. And she said, "Who is that?" I said, "That's Sensei Don Warrener. I told her he's the person that Sensei Legacy, your godfather, met Benny Allen in the dojo." And so she went over to the stage, and Don was really nice when she waved at him and he came. And she said, "My dad said that you're a person that I might want to meet." And he said, "Well, who's your dad?" And Sydney said, "My dad's Randy Dauphin." And at that time, he said, "I don't know who that guy is." And she said, "Well, might know my godfather." And he said, "Who's your godfather?" And she said, "Gary Legacy." And he was so nice. He went down, got my daughter, brought her up on the stage. They sat there up on the stage. He told Sydney a bunch of stories about karate. And what I want to say to you, Don, is thank you for leaving a really nice memory in a young black belt and competitor's mind because that stuck with her to today, and she's really proud that she had that opportunity that day. That's my introduction, Sean. Back to you.
One thing that I can correct on that, if I may, I did not help start the Canadian Black Belt Hall of Fame. I started the Canadian Black Belt Hall of Fame. I'm the one who started it all. It was all my idea, right from the beginning. And the way that I started it, which is an interesting story, if I can share it with you. I phoned up Robert Young, who is the editor of Black Belt Magazine and the Black Belt Hall of Fame. And I said, Robert, you know I'm Canadian, but why are there so few Canadians in the Black Belt Hall of Fame? And he said, well, you're from Canada. I said, yeah. And he says, well, we're here in America. This is Black Belt Hall of Fame is an American Hall of Fame. And I went, oh, okay. So in other words, I'm thinking Canada doesn't really doesn't count. And I went, okay. And then I started thinking about it and I said, no, we have to start this. And so I called up Wally Slokey and I said, Wally, I need you to help me get this thing started. And he said, okay. And then we ran the first and the second Hall of Fame at Vic Granick's tournament in Toronto. That's it. Now you got it right.
I didn't get it right, John. You got it right. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, I don't want to belabor the history idea, but that is exactly what we're talking about. Is
Right.
let's get the stories out there. In terms of story, Don, let's get it from you. I've read a lot about you today, but what was it like growing up for you, and what led you into your first martial arts environment?
Well, I was 17 years old, and my brother beat the hell out of me, knocked me out cold. And I said, well, I don't like that. And he had a friend whose name was Norm Lampman. And Norm was taking karate at Eastern Karate in Hamilton at 45 King William Street. And I said, hey, can I come with you one time and look at it and watch it? And I'd seen some karate on TV. And I said, gee, that looks really cool. And so I went down there and went to the school with Norm. And getting there, you get there and you got to walk up these 3 stories of steps. And it's like a little, maybe a 50-watt light bulb lighting the stairway to get up. So it was like a dungeon and it was totally filthy dirty. I remember that. Just dust everywhere and it was nothing. And I got up to the top and all of a sudden it lit up because it was windows, had 20-foot high ceilings. And this was in probably about, I'm going to say June or July, maybe May or June, something like that. And anyway, I went up, actually, the date was March the 15th, 1966, because I got my black belt 2 years to the day after I started. But anyway, I got up to the top of the stairs and I seen Benny Allen, and he's wearing a black t-shirt and black kung fu pants and white running shoes. And he was teaching the class and he says, what do you want? And Norm said, oh, this is my brother or my friend's brother, and he wants to take karate. He says, okay, well, tell him to sit over there and watch. So I sat over there and watched and watched and watched. And then after it was over, he said, well, if you want to come, you can. Come on back next time and watch it again. So I had to watch 2 times, just sit there and on the chair and watch. And then he said, okay, it's expensive. And I says, okay, how much? And he says, well, it's $7 a month. I said, oh my God, where the hell am I going to get $7, But I had a job working in a supermarket packing groceries, and I was getting like, I think 50 cents an hour or something like that. And that's how I started.
And can I ask you, maybe I'm jumping a little ahead here, but was there a moment when you knew you were in for good? We've all talked about those moments ourselves, but was there a moment where you went, "Oh, I'm doing this"?
I think it was when Peter Urban said to me, he like I remember I was fighting with this guy named George Beatty, and Benny had taught this absolutely stupid technique where you go like this, you block down, you spin around, and you come over your shoulder and you hit the guy in the face this way. I did it. And I hit this guy, George Beatty, like this, right in the face, blood all over the bloody place. And Urban said, that man ran into that man's fist, so there is no disqualification. And I went, okay. And then we started fighting again. And then I don't even want to tell you what he said, but George Beatty started saying things to me that just like was, oh my God, he was a white guy, and it was very racial what he was saying to me. And in those days, it wasn't cool to do that either. And he said some really, really bad things to me. And I got scared out of my pants because I think I was 18, 19 years old, something like that at the time, 17, I don't remember. And anyway, all I did was I just said, I gotta fight. I gotta fight. I gotta defend myself because this guy's gonna kill me, right? And remember, in those days, it was all bare fists, right? There were no padding or anything like that. So I rushed in and I grabbed him like this, right around like this on his gi, and I just started hitting him like this, right? And kept hitting him, and he ran over to the table where Benny was, and Frank Wishart was, and Slokey and Teddy were all over there, and I just kept punching him and punching him in the head, laying him over top of the table, and we come back and he's bleeding more now. And Peter Urban said to me, he says, this man hit this man, but the contact was out of the ring, so no disqualification. And I said, okay. And then I ended up winning the fight. And Peter Urban goes, this man is a strong, good, hard fighter. Congratulations, son. And that was it. And I just went, oh my God. And in those days, Peter Urban was like a god in the martial arts. He was a god. And I think that's what turned me on. And, also other things that you'll probably get to during this interview. But there wasn't any one aha moment that I'm going to be a lifer. No, there was. It just, well, when I say that, I never had a job that I didn't get fired from. It's a true story. I mean, I got fired from my paper route. I got fired from delivering meat on a bicycle. I got fired from Kmart. I got fired from Towers Records. I got fired from every job I ever had. I got fired from, and that's when I said to my mom, I said, "Mom, I think I'm gonna start teaching karate all full time." And she says, "You're gonna do what?" And I said, "I'm going to start teaching karate." And there was no full-time schools. I think there was one in Toronto, but that was it. If there was, I can't remember. I think Oriental School of Self-Defense with Monty Guest was involved with it back then. And anyway, I said, I'm going to start teaching karate. And she says, "You're going to do what?" And I says, "Yeah." And she says, nobody is going to pay you to teach them that kind of stuff." And I went, "Well, I think somebody will." And she said, "Okay, go talk to your father." And I said, "Okay, Dad, I'm going to start teaching karate full time." And he said, "What? Why are you going to do that? Why don't you go back to Stelco? I know some people down there. I'll get you another job at Stelco. You don't want to be a carpenter, you can work in a steel mill." And I went, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I think I want to teach karate. And he said, okay, I'll tell you what. You go ahead and do it. And then when you fail, you come back to me and I'll get you back in the steel mill. I said, okay. That's how I started.
I love that. I love that. You were a lifer by then, I'm sure. Don, I have a question for you, just because we have, you know, deep history with Benny Allen, and I'd love, for you to chat about your experience, what your takes, like how you felt the classes were, what you loved about it, and just break open who he was for you.
Oh, I could fill your 2 hour show or your 90-minute show with just that. I'll try and brief it down to as much as possible. Every class was 2 hours long. The classes were every Tuesday and Thursday and Sunday. And I never missed a class, never, ever, ever. And in fact, I used to go Wednesdays. I'd get on the bus in Hamilton and go to Keele and Dundas and go to Benny's school down in the basement underneath the pool hall. And I'd go there and train as well. But Benny's classes they weren't trying so much to teach you, they were trying to get you to quit.
Hmm.
That's what I felt it was like, But I wasn't, my parents come from there were cowboys and cowgirls in Western Canada, and tough people. Like my mom herded 300 sheep across the prairie on horseback, type of thing. My mom and dad's first house was a dirt floor, so I come from that type of environment. And you just, my brother beat me up, knocked me out, type of thing. It was a tough environment, but that's where I came from. And I share with you two stories that will kind of give you an idea of what it was like. The first story was I was an orange belt, and there was this girl in the class who I was kind of sweet on. Her name was Lil, and she was really short, but she was kind of cute. And a big class was 9 people. That was a huge class, right? And anyway, Lil was in the class, and Benny said, okay, let's do some sparring. So Lil comes up and he says, okay, Cliff, come on up. And Cliff was this cop. I I don't know, so long ago, but I would guess he was about 6'5", maybe 230 pounds. Solid. That's what I remember. And Lil was maybe 5'3", and Cliff came in and went bam, punched her right in the face, dropped her to the ground. I got upset, and I said, "Wow." And then Benny says, "Okay, Donnie, you come up and you fight Cliff." Meanwhile, Lil's off to the side, cleaning her face from the blood. And I said, "This son of a gun." And I said, "I'm going to get him." So I went, bam, I nailed him right in the solar plexus, dropped him, right? He gets up off the floor and he's swearing at me and he says, "What the hell's that all about?" I says, "Well, you hit Lil, I'm hitting you." And he says, "Oh, yeah, okay, let's see." So we started fighting again. Cliff comes in and he goes, bam, hits me right in the face, the nose, blood all over the bloody place. I'm on the floor. Benny comes over and he says, Donnie, get up. I said, get up. I'll never forget this. He says, I told you to get up. Get up, you bloody panty waist, or get out. That's exactly what he said to me. I'm 17 years old. You know, get up, you bloody panty waist, or get out. And I said, well, I don't want to get out. I'm going to get up. And I got up and he says, all right, fight again. And so now we're fighting again. And I got blood all over my face and my uniform. And we fought again. And then maybe 30 seconds later, he says, okay, stop. Okay, that's it for today, guys. Let's go home. And I went, holy shit, that was one story. So that was a very pivotal moment for me. And then about, I guess maybe 6 months later, I was in the class and I was training as hard as I could. And Benny was there and he says, Donnie, come over here for a minute. And I said, okay. So I went over and he says, Donnie, I don't think this is for you. I said, what? He says, I don't think karate is what you should be doing. I think you should go home and do something else. But you shouldn't be doing karate. You don't train hard enough. And I went, Benny, I'm doing my best. I really am. And he says, well, it's not good enough. You got to train harder or you're going to have to get out, one or the other. I can't have somebody who's not doing their best. And I said, Benny, I really am. He says, all right, get back on the floor. Let's see you do some harder training now. And I went back and fuck, push-ups, knuckle push-up, finger push-ups, thumb push-up, everything, And that's what the training was like. The classes, like I say, were 2 hours. Every single class was a minimum of 45 minutes calisthenics. And I mean calisthenics, at least 300 push-ups in a class, right? At least 15 minutes of stretching, leg stretching. I had my splits about this far from the ground, sideways, like Wally Slokey could do. And then I said, that's it, man. I got to get the splits full. So that night I went in and I went, bam, and I just dropped. And I got right down, groin on the floor, and I went, all I heard was, and I went, what the hell? Oh, shit. I got up and I looked, my legs were sore, my groin muscle was sore, and I had to finish the class. And I said, that's it. That's how the training was. So it was about 15 minutes of stretching in every class, 45 minutes of calisthenics, running, push-ups, sit-ups, etc., etc. And then and then Benny would say, okay, everybody, take a break. Let's go have a smoke break. And everybody would go to the back room, Frank Wishard, Slokey, Benny, everybody, and go back and have a cigarette, right? Except me. I couldn't afford the cigarettes. And so Benny used to say to me, okay, Donnie, you're not going to be smoking, so go clean the washroom. And I went, okay. So I'd go clean the washroom. And another time it was go sweep the stairs down, or all those kind of garbage jobs, right? But that's what the training was like with Benny. And then after the smoke break, it was usually about, I'd say, half an hour on kata and then a half an hour on sparring, right? On the sparring techniques and that. But kata was not, it wasn't important. It was like, okay, we do kata, but it wasn't important. You got to remember, in those days, there was no such thing as Goju Ryu or Shotokan or Shorin Ryu or Wado Ryu. None of that was there. None of it, none of it, none of it. It was just karate. And I mean, am I going on too much, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, I think that's great, but I actually want to throw it to Hanshi Legacy to just, Hanshi, is there anything you want to add? I mean, he was a couple years before you, but is there anything you want to talk about in terms of your experience or anything he's mentioning that pings anything for you?
Yeah, that pretty well lines up with it, except Billy Hines took a liking to me, and he used to jump on my back, piggyback, to do the exercises.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way I see it too.
Yeah.
We're not easy classes.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was, I mean, like, as an example, we did, like Bob Dalglish used to come in with Benny from Toronto, and he would teach a kata, teach a Sanshin. And then Benny would come the next day and teach Heian 4, right? And this is a true story. Benny comes in one day and he says, okay, we're going to do Heian number 4. And so we go, first move is this, right? Then we do the rest of the kata. He comes back in the next day, that was a Tuesday. On the Thursday, he says, nah, that is dumb. You're going to get your bloody fingers broken if your hands are open. Let's do hand on four like this. Okay, we'll do it hand on four like this. Then come back the next day and he says, nah, we got to keep it. We got to keep some tradition. I said, okay. He said, so what we're going to do is keep this hand closed and this one open. And I, okay. And then he'd come back in the next day and he said, no, 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 no. This hand open, that hand closed. Okay. And that was like that for the whole bloody kata, not just the first moves, all the moves in the kata. And then at the end, he said, nah, let's do it this way. Then we all went back to the first way again. That's what Benny was like teaching. Like Benny was not a conformist. You know, I often said this, and I really think it's the truth. Benny Allen was Canada's answer to Bruce Lee. He was totally non-conforming. It didn't matter. He would go this way, this way, this way, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There was no such thing as always the same. I mean, Gary, you started in what year did you start? 1971?
Yes.
Right. And so you met Benny in about what, 1972?
I met him when I was a green belt, so it's still in 1971.
Oh, it was in 71 at the
Yeah.
Delta.
At 1109 Main Street
Yeah.
East.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, at the Delta Club. Okay. But that's what the training was like back then. I mean, and it uh as a little addition on it, you know, Benny came in one day and he said, okay, membership fees are going to go up to $9 a month. And I went, oh, Christ. Where am I going to get the money? And I said, okay, Benny. I said, I'll get it somehow. I'll get it. And he says, no, 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 no. He says, Donnie, here's the key to the dojo. You come in a half an hour before anybody else. You sweep the floor and you turn the heat on, right? He showed me how to light a oil heater, right? And that's what we had, was a big oil heater that was supposed to keep the dojo warm, but it never did. I mean, so in the middle of the winter, you know, I mean, and it was cold, all linoleum floors, and it was freezing in there. The only reason, what you had to do once you got there, the change room was, oh, I don't know if there was a window or not open all the time, but it was freezing. You get your gi on, and the first thing you do is start running. You didn't run for the idea of running. You ran to try and get warm because you were so cold from the cold. I mean, and the windows, I mean, if you ever get Pat Amandolio on here, he'll tell you the same story. He didn't train with Benny in the beginning. He trained with John Webster. But what everybody was totally afraid of was that when you were sparring, that you might get kicked and get shot out the window, because there's little wee thin one pane glass and big windows. There's about, I guess maybe it's 8 or 9 of them in the dojo, on one side and on two sides of it. Everybody was afraid of getting kicked out the window or kicked down the fire escape, because there's a big long fire escape too. So that's what training was like back then.
Thanks, Don. So I want to be a little more brief on this next one because we've had some questions come in, but a name that's always interested me in the history of Canadian karate, and he's come up a lot, but there isn't a lot written about him, is Bob Dalgleish. So what's your take on Bob Dalgleish? Tell us a little about him as well.
If you haven't got this book, you need to get this book. It's called Searching. And I wrote this book about Benny and Bob, and it's on Amazon.com. And you will be able to read everything there that you want to know about Benny and Bob in that book, and about what karate was like in those early days. Bob Dalgleish, he was the first Ronin of Canada. Bob was notorious for just going, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Vancouver today. And he was a draftsman, right? So he had a little bit of money. And then he'd get out on the Trans Canada, and he'd start hitchhiking, and he'd go all the way to Vancouver, and he'd stop in Sudbury. In Sudbury, he'd stop and see somebody. Then he'd go to Sault Ste. Marie, see Rudy Timmerman. Then he'd go to Thunder Bay, see Dan Packluck. Then he'd hitchhike to Winnipeg, and he'd go see Pat Gallagher from Tiger Claw Kung Fu, and then he'd go from there. He'd go to not Saskatoon, to Regina, and see those. I forgot their name. The two brothers that were teaching there, and then he'd go to Calgary and he'd train and stay at Heinz Rotman's place, and then he'd go to Vancouver and he'd train and go to Chinatown and train in Tai Chi. And then if one of his trips, he decided he'd go all the way down to San Francisco. And he went down to San Francisco, and that's when he met Richard Kim and also Gosei Yamaguchi. And I talked to Gosei Yamaguchi a long time ago, and he says, yes, I remember Bob Dalglish, big, tall, skinny guy, but he was very good, very good. And I said, yeah, yeah. And of course, Sensei Kim knew who he was. And then he even come all the way down to LA, and he trained with Nishiyama, right? And then he'd go from Nishiyama's to New York City, hitchhiking again across the country. And he'd get to New York City and he'd train with Peter Urban. And then he'd come back to Toronto. And that would be maybe 6 months, 7 months out of the year. And that's what Bob liked. But Bob liked to drink beer. Bob liked to smoke dope. Bob liked to, he liked kata. He loved his katas. And he was more of a kata man than a fighter. Benny was the fighter. That's my story.
I really appreciate that. I'm not a Ronin. I have a school, I have a path with them, but I do travel a lot and I train when I travel, and I've always felt a little connected to Sensei Bob Dalglish spiritually that way. I just want to throw out very quickly, both Sensei Dofen and I apologize for looking down a little, but we were actually trying to order your book and we can't find it on Amazon. So is there a website that you can send us and others to get it?
If you go to my website, www.warrenerentertainment.com, and type in searching, you'll get it there too. And if you can't get it after, somebody asked me to send you some links. I sent some links to him today. That was the guy that contacted me at the beginning.
Yeah.
Robert, I think. Yeah. I sent him a link to searching on my website. Yeah, it's on my website, but it is on Amazon.
Not surprising. Kiyoshi Rice has found it and she's sending me the links.
Great.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
but it's a good book. The truth is that is a good book. And it really, like when I write, there's no bullshit. It's just, that's the way it is. People get upset at me because they wanted history warped in their favor. I had somebody who I won't mention his name asked me to write a book about him. And I said, no, I can't write a book about you. And he said, why not? And I said, because I don't agree with what you're going to tell me. I know you're going to try and change it so that it makes you look better than what you already are. And I said, I can't write that book. When I write the truth. The same as what I'm telling you guys today on this interview. What I'm telling you is 100% God's honest truth. No bullshit.
Well, we appreciate it, Don, and we're really excited to get into that book because we're not just spiritual, but literal martial arts successors of Benny Allen. Haunchi Legacy?
I have it.
Yeah, I bet you do.
I think I sent it to you, didn't I, Gary?
You did, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so, yeah.
Sensei Burkowski just said, I love the raw history, real deal. So look, Don, there's so much of your history we won't have time for, but there's the now. and there's your mind. And so we're going to go to some questions that are in the now that people want to ask you. And the first one is from Sensei Copeland. And he just said, my question for Sensei Warrener, for Don, with all the things you have done, is there anything you could change and why?
First off, Conroy can call me Sensei. I don't have a problem with that. He started training with me in 1973, I think. I remember when he came to my dojo, it was after a tournament, and Richard Kim was at the tournament. It was the first time he came to Canada, and Richard Kim was there. Conroy came after to my dojo, and I says, "Oh," he says, "I want to start training with you." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, what katas do you do?" Because I was teaching pure Goju at that time, right? The Yamaguchi Goju. I says, well, I do the tekis, I do the Hainans, I do Sanchin, and I do Saifa, or something like that. But I said, that's not Goju. He said, what? I said, no, Conrad, that's not Goju. Goju is Taikyokos, Geksai, Sanchin, Saifa, Tenchu, blah, 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 the whole Goju list. He said, okay. And I showed him. I remember to this day, I pulled out a book that Yamaguchi I had from Gogen Yamaguchi. No, anyway, I had the book and I showed it to him, the list of the katas in the book. And he said, okay. And that's when Conroy really started doing Goju. And then he trained with Chinen, who was a terrific kata person, probably just phenomenal when it comes to absolute pure Okinawan Goju. I got to try to keep the questions a lot shorter.
That's okay. Before we get back to the question, I do want to say, Sensei Copeland, I added in the Don part, and Don did say at the beginning that you're one of the people who could call him Sensei. So that was me adding that, not him.
Yep. Okay.
Don, is there anything you could change and why, if you could?
The only thing that I can think of, I should not have stopped competing as early as I did. I know I could have done better, and I know I could have won a lot more tournaments. Not that it would have done any difference to me at this stage, but I shouldn't have stopped competing so soon. I stopped competing in 1970. Well, I stopped competing in 1973, and then I started again in 1996, competing again overseas in Europe and Germany, and then in Bermuda, et cetera, et cetera.
And then why would you have liked to have continued? What do you think that might have given you?
I think that probably more ego. Winning more tournaments would have given me more ego and more. Although I was never short on being egotistical or whatever, but I think I would have had more confidence. Maybe that's a better way of putting it than I had.
Appreciate that. Thank you for that. So our next question is from Al Panakia, a dear friend and guest of the show. Do you have any interesting stories about Hal Sharp, the judo historian?
About who?
Hal Sharp.
Oh, Hal Sharp. Whew. My best story about Hal Sharp was he came to my studio, and he became a really good friend of mine. And I says, Hal, tell me about your background. He says, well, I trained in judo in Japan, and one day, Pano Sensei, Kise came to me and said, or somebody said, Sensei wants to see you upstairs. So went up to see Kise Sensei Risi Kano, Jigaro Kano's son. And he says, I went up and you kneel down outside the door, you pull the door sideways, you go in, you bow, and you go into the table that's on the floor. And he was sitting there and he said, Sharp-san, please come, sit. And he sat down and he said, Sharp-san, I have something for you very special. And I said, oh, okay. He said, okay, what? And he pushed this little box about this big across the table to him. And he opened it up, and it was a silver sake cup. And on the bottom of the cup, it had the imperial seal. It had come from the Emperor of Japan because Hal Sharp had won the Foreigner Cup in Japan, and he was given this cup by the Jigaro, or by the Emperor of Japan. But that's not the best part of the story. The best part, he says, he took it home, and he said he came back to LA, and he says, I was about 26 years old or something, and I wanted to get married, right? So I took my wife up on Mulholland Ridge. We're up there looking out over the city, and he asked her if she would marry him. And she said yes. And he says, the only problem is I don't have any money to buy you a ring, but I can give you the most valuable thing I have. And she said, okay. And this is a true story. It's like a movie, this one. He pulled out a red ribbon out of his pocket, and he pulled out the sake cup, and he tied it around her finger as their wedding ring. That's my Hal story, Hal Sharp story.
That's beautiful. And I know Mulholland very well.
Yep.
That's a beautiful place to do that with anybody.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I appreciate that. So our next question, Dawn, is from Glenn Kerr. Glenn, nice to hear from you. Welcome to the show. Considering history, who do you think is the successor to Miyagi Chojun?
Depends on who you want to talk to. You know, if you talk to one side, it's this guy. If you talk to this side, it's this guy. It's Miyazato, or it's the other Yagi tribe. Or if you talk to some people, they'll say it's this guy or it's that guy. I don't think it really matters who it is. Technically, and this is just pure straight, the technically best Goju person I personally have ever seen in my life was Morio Higaonna. I mean, absolutely amazing. I mean, I'd never seen anything like him before. He's just amazing. And his hands, I mean, when I met him at the airport to come to do seminars, I shook his hand, and his hand, the knuckles were all bleeding, right? Because he'd been training the Makiwara that morning. But that was okay. But then he turned his hand over, right? And I went, oh my God. And I'm not exaggerating. Every fingertip, every little pad in between, all these, all around here, all this, all the way up, all calloused, right? His hands were like meat cleavers. I mean, technically, he's the best guy I've ever seen. Another, I better not say that story.
Well, we'll leave it to you to censor yourself as you wish. Another question I want to ask you, because you've trained with so many luminaries in Japan, or Japanese luminaries outside of Japan. I did spend about 6 months training with Hidetaka Nishiyama Sensei, and but which of the Japanese legends do you think live up to or exceed their name? Who did you meet over there that you just went, wow, this really is the source?
Yamaguchi and Nishiyama both. I became kind of, I don't know why, but Nishiyama and I became kind of friendly. And of course, Demura. You know, those three guys, Inoita was great. Kenazawa was awesome. I mean, those guys, they were the real deals. I can tell you stories about each one of them that'll make you go, oh my God. You know, like the Nishiyama story is, I have a video that I did on Nishiyama, and he says, okay, come in and you can talk to me. And I said, okay, Sensei. And I went in and I had my proverbial binder with me, and I had about 25 pages of nonstop questions for him, right? And anyway, I went in and I started talking to him, and I said, Sensei, and Isaac Florentine was with me, and he couldn't believe I said this to Nishiyama. If you trained with Nishiyama, you know what kind of a guy he was. He was like very, very whom, nothing short of just straight. And I said to Sensei Nishiyama, I said, Sensei, I've got a question for you. And he says, okay, ask. I said, Sensei, people are telling me that you're really difficult to deal with and that you're hard to work with. And Nishiyama, he says, ha, 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 ha. And he slapped his chest like this and he said, yes, they're right. I am. I'm very difficult to deal with, guaranteed. And I went, okay. but I can also tell you this. Nishiyama is probably the technically, not probably, he was the technically best karate man on the face of the earth for Shotokan.
I really appreciate that. I had a wonderful time, and he seemed to take an interest in me, and would always sit with me after, and he'd smoke in his office before or
Oh,
after class, and then we'd just chat about ideas, and it was a beautiful experience for me. And Sensei
yep,
Don and Hanchi Legacy came down and met him as well.
good.
Yeah, and we've got a little bit of time before we get to your 10 questions. So I want to ask, you're talking about that competitive period, letting it go. But during that period, you're training with Benny Allen, you're meeting all these other people. What's the most important period in there for you that led to not just being a young man, but being a real adult in the martial arts and starting your businesses? And what was the impetus for these next layers and levels that you got to that whether you like the word or not, have made you a true luminary?
Uh, Definitely Richard Kim. Definitely Richard Kim. I mean, not maybe Richard Kim just took my eyes and went bang to see the world. And I realized that what he was teaching was totally different than what anybody else was teaching anywhere in the world. Right? For me, I mean, Gary knows my background, and I could fight before I met Richard Kim. Same as Gary. Gary was a hell of a fighter before he even did karate. He knew what the hell he was doing, no question about it, right? But for me, I wanted more out of the martial arts than just being able to fight. I wanted to know what this philosophy was, what this psychology was that I'd heard about, but nobody seemed to teach it. It was just kind of whatever. And the first time I went to San Francisco, Benny, myself, and Dennis Verbatic were supposed to go. And Dennis Verbatic from Hamilton, him and I went to Toronto to pick up Benny. And Benny said, I'm not going. And I went, oh. And he says, Donnie, you take this. And he handed me a briefcase, right? And he says, you take this and give it to Richard Kim. He's going to give you some stuff. Bring the briefcase back to me. I said, okay. So I went and I didn't even open the briefcase up. Got to San Francisco, handed Benny Allen, or handed Richard Kim the briefcase. He opened it and he says, okay. And in it was a bunch of money and some resumes from Andre Langelier, Fern Cleroux, I can't remember, and Benny. Not Benny didn't have a resume, but that was it. And Richard Kim says, okay, you come to class tomorrow. I'll have this for you. And I went back and I got Fern Cleroux's second degree black belt, Andre Langelier's second degree black belt, and I got Benny Allen's fourth degree black belt. And I brought them back and gave them to Benny.
Sensei, Hanshi Legacy, is there anything you want to add about Richard Kim or break open, as you both have quite a path and a history, and even what he talked about, the eye opening with the philosophy, etc.?
Um, he was absolutely the guy who changed my karate into classical and traditional karate. Before that, like Don said, Benny Allen was sort of I hate to use this word, but a crude type of fighter, but you wouldn't want to stand in front of him and have him hit you. So after training with Benny Allen and when he retired and then eventually passed, I needed another teacher, so I went to Richard Kim to get the enlightening part of martial arts. And he was at that time the top historian. And I even had some of you guys come to his last lecture, just because even though I hadn't been with him for 20, 25 years, just so you would get to meet him.
Trino Sensei did Iaido for him at that event.
If you look it up right now, who the top, say, 10 best martial artist teachers of all time is, he still ranks 5th. I don't know who it was, but I was really surprised.
So, if I can interject, Gary, Sensei Kim's book, The Weaponless Warrior, is now back available on Amazon.com. But about, I'm going to go 5 years ago, I talked to a guy named Louis Jemison, who you may know or may not know, I don't know, from Santa Cruz. And he said, Donnie, come on up to Santa Cruz. Sensei Kim, I got notes on Sensei Kim I want you to have. I went up, okay. I think I was going to get like this, but I got up there and he handed me a stack of notes like this from all the early lectures that Sensei Kim taught at the Chinese YMCA in Sacramento Street in San Francisco. And I took them and I didn't do anything with them. I brought out, the book that I wrote on Sensei Kim, the 20th Century Samurai, but I had them, and then I always had them, and I just didn't know what I was going to do with them. And it came to me about a month ago. And so I've come out with this book. This is the new book on Richard Kim, and it's a sequel to The Weaponless Warrior. And some of the chapter titles include, as you remember this term, Gary, samurai training. This talks about what samurai training was all about. An article on Chibana Choshin, Sukaro Bokaden, Yuichi Kanbun, Bojitsu, Yari Jitsu, Yamoku Teshu, Karate Sakagawa, Matsumura Soken. And that's only some. There's 20 different short stories in this, just like The Weaponless Warrior. And, as a publisher, my job is to publish. My job is not to read everybody's books. So a lot of the books that I published, I haven't even read them, to be honest with you. The same with the DVDs. But I did read every single word in this book. And I can tell you, and I'm not here to sell or anything like that. You don't want it, don't buy it. I don't care, right? This is a damn good book. The stories on Matsumura Soken, it's about 4 or 5 pages long. Oh my God. I never realized what a guy he was. He was amazing. Of course, I knew who Sukaro Bokaden was, and I knew what the samurai training was like. But this book it'll be out before the end of the month. It's not out now, but it will be out by the end of the month. It's a very, very good book. Very good book.
Thanks, Don. That's really exciting. That's a book we've been steeled on in our club. Don, it's time for your 10 questions. We ask all our guests the 10 questions, and you have 10 minutes to answer. We ask that you answer impulsively, but feel free to expand on your answers. But if you take 10 minutes to answer one question, then that'll be your one question. So I'll leave it to you, and we'll start. Are you ready for your 10 questions?
I'm ready.
Okay. Sensei Dauphin, are you ready with the timer? We got it. Don, what is your favorite martial arts technique?
Nowadays, or when I was younger? When I was younger, it was my left roundhouse kick and my left step inside kick. Nowadays, it's my right hand. Yeah, I'm 77 years old. You can't kick like you used to at this age, let me tell you.
Right on. Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
Richard Kim.
Who do you think is the most influential martial artist alive today?
Well, obviously Bruce Lee was, but if you're talking Japanese martial arts, I'd say Fumio Demura. If you're talking Taekwondo, I guess you got to say General Choi. And if you're talking Aikido, it's got to be Yoshiba. And if you're talking samurai, it's got to be Miyamoto Masashi or Tsukaro Bokaden.
And alive today, who do you think?
Well, I don't think there's too many. There's no one person that stands out anymore. They're all gone. Nishiyama's gone. Takubota's gone. Fumio Demura's gone. Okazaki's gone. So I guess, the only one that's really still alive and doing it has to be Bill Wallace. I guess that's the best one I can give you.
What's your favorite martial arts movie?
Oh, Enter the Dragon.
What is the best thing you think martial arts has done for the world?
I think it's brought people together, and I think tournaments, seminars are where people come together to become friends, and they then go ahead and develop camaraderie, brotherhood, all that at tournaments, and of course in the dojo too. But if you want to expand it, it's tournaments and seminars.
Don, what advice would you give to your younger self? You get to decide the age.
Oh, when I was 25, compete more.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Line up. I guess so.
If you could have any actor play you in a movie, who would it be?
I can't think of anybody. I can't think of anybody that could play me that would be. No, I can't think. I don't have a name. I never thought of that.
I'm going to pick someone around my age, Matt Damon. You at age 50? I see Matt Damon.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was going to pick Sean Benson.
I appreciate that. Don, you're going through these questions relatively quickly, so I'm going to give you a bonus 11th question. There's
Go
two
ahead.
after that. But if none of the arts that you consider yourself well-versed in existed, what art do you wish you dedicated your life to?
A martial art?
Yeah. Or an art. We can do both.
Oh, I think I would have loved to have been a singer, or I would have loved to have been an artist, or I would singer, an artist. But I'm pretty damn happy doing what I've done. Karate's my life. That's the only thing I know. People ask me, about this or that. I don't know anything else. I don't know about uh, cooking, or I don't know about. I'm a karate bum. That's what I am. When I started karate, I became a karate bum. That's all I am. Just a karate bum.
Don, our last two questions come as a pair. What is your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret?
My greatest achievement, of course, is my two girls, Tracy and Danielle. I think they're fabulous. And I can look at them and I can say, wow, their mother did a good job raising them. I did my best, but the truth is that she was more involved in raising them because, my life was get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, have breakfast, go to the dojo for 10 o'clock, stay at the dojo all day, don't come home till midnight. That's 5 days a week. Saturday, I'd come home at 6 o'clock and I'd go out with the boys or some of the guys and have a beer or whatever. Sunday, back to the dojo. I was in the dojo 7 days a week. it's my life. I don't know anything else, whether it was the business aspect of it or whether it was the training. I mean, I used to go downstairs at the Delta, and there was a guy named Dwayne. Dwayne Watson was, oh, if you think Wally Slokey was tough and dangerous, you have no idea about Dwayne Watson. Dwayne Watson was, I hope he's not listening, and don't tell him where I live. He was a little bit slow, right? But he had to weigh 260 pounds, and he was maybe 6 foot tall. And he did not understand the meaning of pulling a punch. He did not understand that concept. He just didn't. And I used to say, well, I got to get better. I got to get better. I got to get better. So Dwayne used to work at the Stelco, and I gave him a key. So he'd come in after his class after working at 8 o'clock in the morning. Dwayne would be in the dojo, and he was so big. He used to have to get horse liniment to put on his muscles to warm them up. And the room would stink like, ugh. And I'd go down there and I'd spar with Dwayne, and I'd say, that's dumb. I'm not doing that anymore. And I'd go back and I'd say, no more, no more. It's the same with Slokey. I called Wally up one time and I said, Wally, I want to come and train with you. And he says, okay, come on. And so I went to his dojo underneath the barber shop, and he says, okay, let's spar. So very nice. We bow to each other. And I always had good control, except for that one time in the tournament. But anyway, whoops. There we go. Anyway, I went to his school and I said, let's spar. First thing, whap, head turns. Okay, that was an accident. He didn't mean to hit me. Whap, turned my head the other way. After about 20 minutes, I said, that's enough. I can't beat this guy. He's too good. Wally Slokey he was a tremendous fighter. He was just, I mean, in the 70s, he was the king of the castle. Nobody beat him. Nobody in Ottawa, Quebec, Montreal, down into the States, New York City. He used to fight in the Manhattan Center. And, he had everybody loving him. Everybody. I mean, he was a tough, tough guy. Really tough guy. What was the other part of the question?
Well, greatest regret.
I guess I don't have that many regrets, to be honest with you, because I've always had the philosophy, if I want to do something, I do it. I just do it. Yeah, I don't really have any regrets. I got lots of stuff to do yet. I got a lot of things I want to get done, but no regrets that I can think of. If I wanted to, like, I wanted to come and train with Nishiyama. I wanted Mario Higaona to come to Canada. Richard Kim, Benny had talked about him, and Bob had talked about him, and then I said, oh, I'll go to San Francisco and meet him. And I went. And I mean, the same with all the rest of the guys, the Kanazawas. I mean, having Kanazawa come here for me was like a real treat, because I had him for a week all to myself. Him and his son and Murakami, they came to do DVDs with us, and what a treat, what an honor to have him around. Just a wonderful human being, really, really nice guy, and of course, super talented.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I just want to say, before we get to one last brief question, that you talk about your lack of regrets and meeting people if you want to meet them. You've dropped a lot of names in this show that we haven't heard before, and we really appreciate that. And some of them we don't have time to get into, but it's a real pleasure on this living history to hear new names from back in the day. The way we end our show is we do something called Round the Horn, where we talk about our time with you. But before we do that, In 1 minute or less, I'd love if you could tell us, as somebody who's traveled to as many countries, if not more, as any guest we've ever had, what do you see as the common thread in martial arts everywhere you go?
Um, the common thread is the common thread is that everybody is searching for something in martial arts. And if I can share this one line with you, my the best answer I had was with Peter Urban. I used to ask everybody, Wally J, Kenazawa, Nishiyama, Richard Kim, blah, 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 Gogen Yamaguchi, etc., etc. What is enlightenment? Because I don't know what the hell it is. And so I asked that to Peter Urban. And Peter Urban said this to me. I never forgot it. He said, enlightenment is realizing the fact that everyone, including you, is looking for someone to save you from yourself. And enlightenment is realizing the fact that that someone you're looking for is yourself. Pretty deep, eh?
Really appreciate that. I'm really glad I asked that question. So before we go around the horn, I want to say thank you to Robert Schlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedishev, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landolt, Drita Guliani, Stavros Stavroulias, and Emily Ruth Driscoll for helping run this show behind the scenes. We don't have a show. We cannot do it without you. Thank you, everybody. So, Hanshi Legacy, and by the way, thank you to the new guests who've tuned in and asked questions. We really appreciate, or the new listeners on Zoom. We really appreciate you being here. Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight with Don?
Hey, Don. um, it was good to go back. Don goes back a little bit further than myself, maybe a year or two with Benny Allen, but it was nice to listen to him talk about those times because when people ask me, we're in the same ballpark about Benny Allen and that. And it was good to hear from him. I think we got to come back to Canada sometime, and he's going to get in touch with us. And it was a good show.
Thanks.
Thanks for agreeing to come on there, Don.
My pleasure, Gary. And I would not have done it if it wasn't for you, Gary Legacy. You're the only guy that could get me to do this. I've never done these podcasts before. I get asked all the time, but I just find them to be a waste. But I like Gary Legacy. What can I tell you? I like the guy.
Well, I just want to say that we've all experienced many open doors because of Hanshi Legacy, and we're glad that the door to you was open because of him. So thank you both for that. Sensei Suino, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
Oh, this was great. I'm mostly a listener. There's a lot of conversations about people who connect more with Hanshi Legacy's history than mine, but it's fascinating to hear it. And Don, it's great to make your acquaintance this way. I've seen your name around martial arts circles and seen your publications for decades, and it's just amazing to put a voice and a face to the name. So thank you so much for coming on our show.
Yeah. And if I can just interject one thing before we end it. May the 2nd, Castleton Cemetery, just about 90 minutes north of on the 401 outside of Toronto. We're going to have a memorial service for Benny Allen. May the 2nd at 12 noon. Everybody and anybody is welcome to come.
We appreciate that. And by the way, when we go around the horn, the last word is going to go to you, Don. Sensei Dauphin, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
Well, I asked Don if he wanted to watch shows to get the gist of what we do, and he said no, he just likes to wing it. And so I always like to write down a lot of the things, Don, that you say and the guests that come on. So I like the discussion in the beginning actually about how you hold sensei for your students and not for other people. So That was good discussion. Um, I obviously really like the stories about Benny Allen. I told you already, Don. I named my son after him.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, I like he made you watch the first two classes, and you said he was wearing a black T-shirt. That's Sensei Legacy always says, oh yeah, he was always wearing a T-shirt when he was teaching. You had to pay that crazy amount of $7 a month, which was actually crazy then, but people only talk about it now because $7 is not much these days. But um, I like that story about him making you get up and calling you a panty waist. That's in my mind. I could, even though I never met him, I could just picture that in my mind. So um, I like that you said that Benny Allen was Canada's Bruce Lee. I've never, because he was a nonconformist. That's
True.
That's something that it's going to stick with me. I actually also I really, really love Sensei Copeland. So it was really nice to hear you talk about your time with him and the introductions and Shin Sensei and Richard Kim. I like that you said that, you were really clear you want to talk about Richard Kim, and I'm glad we did. And again, that really lines up with what Sensei Legacy says about him. And your 10 questions, your left roundhouse kick. Again, most influential for you is Richard Kim. Uh, Enter the Dragon as a movie. Last time I went to Japan, I watched it when I was on the plane just because it was there, and I was like, I gotta watch this movie. So I love that movie. Um, Best thing about martial arts, brought lots of people together, and it's still bringing lots of people together. So I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. Um, Advice to your younger self: compete more. You want to hear God say, line up? I love that. And yeah, May 2nd at Castleton Cemetery. My plan, and I know Sensei Legacy's plan, will be to be there. So, and it will be nice to see you in person, Don. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Don, I get to say so much during the conversation, but I just want to say, as a guy who loved surf culture growing up, I've only surfed a little, but I know so many surf bums down in LA. And when you said I'm a karate bum, I felt that. I got that. I love that. You just gave over to it and it became your way of life. And, I'm going to meditate on that and, just lean in a little more to being the martial arts bum that I am. And I really appreciated you naming it that way. What do you want to say to end things off and say goodnight to our listeners?
Don't take yourself so serious, folks. You're doing karate. You're not doing heart surgery. You're doing karate. Have fun. Go out and meet people. Go meet all kinds of them. Go train with anybody you can think of that's got a name. Uh, go train with them, but don't take yourself so serious. This is karate. You're not doing. You're not becoming a priest. You're not becoming a. You're becoming a karate man. So enjoy it. Go see people, meet people. Don't be afraid to come up to them and go, "Hi, how are you? My name is blah blah blah." Right? I mean, that's how I started in LA. I went to a thing called Dragon Fest, and I said, "I got to meet everybody here." Or if I'm going to make it in LA, I got to meet people. And I've been here 27, 28 years now, 29 years. And what I did was I said, I'm going to go to this thing called Dragon Fest, and I'm going to go up to as many people as I can. And I'm going to go like this. Hi, my name's Don Warrener. I just moved to Los Angeles and I'm opening up a film studio and I want you to be in my movies. And the first guy I went up to was Don Wilson. Second guy I went up to was Benny Urquidez. And the third guy I went up to was this guy who's sitting over there and he's reading a book and he's got three little kids running around like this and he's trying to hold down three kids and flip pages. And I went up to him and sure enough, he was reading one of the books that I translated, Tote Jitsu by Gishin Funakoshi. And I said, "Oh, you like this?" And he says, "Oh, yes, yes, yes. I love it very much. I love anything to do with traditional Budo. This is fantastic." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm the guy that had it translated." He says, "You are? You are? What's your name?" I said, "My name's Don Warrener." He says, "Oh, you're Don Warrener? And I went, oh, God. I go 5,000 miles to get away from people, and now this guy knows me, right? And he says, yes. He says, you're not going to believe this, but you're the man that taught me how to speak English. I said, what? How can I have taught you English? He says, I'm from Tel Aviv, Israel. Isaac Florentine's his name, of course. And he said, I used to get on my bicycle as a kid and drive 5 miles to this store, the only one that had magazine articles in it. And you had a thing called the Canadian Connection. And I said, yeah, I did. He says, well, I used to buy it just to read about Canada and the karate people in Canada. And the last thing, because I could go on for hours, but the truth is this about Canada. Canadian karate people are as good as anybody in the world. I don't care if you go to Okinawa, you go to Japan, you go to Korea. The Canadian martial arts people are as good as anybody. Anybody that says that they're not is full of BS. I've seen them. I know what they're like. Yeah, there's some good guys like Memorial Higona, but I got to tell you, Caesar Borkowski's right in that group. He's one of the top guys in the world. People don't realize how good Borkowski is. I mean, you got Jean-Yves Thériault in Ottawa, Wally Slokey. I mean, everybody still knows about Wally Slokey and his scissor leg takedown. Canadian karate is first class all the way, and that's the truth.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, senseis.